So, did you hear about the Grammy debacle going on? Did you hear about the
No,
Grammys?
I scrolled across somebody the weekend and somebody else talking about how the Grammys aren't important anymore. I didn't invest any more time into it, but I saw it in passing.
Yeah, I have an interesting hot take on the Grammys, but like I guess
What
what
were they
happened.
saying?
Well, what happened is just like a bunch of people who probably deserved to be nominated for Grammys weren't, including The Weeknd, who had one of the like hottest tracks of the year. Blinding Lights was massive this year. Like it was a big track. Not necessarily saying he should win, but maybe he could have. But he definitely should have been nominated. I think he was nominated for like one or two things, but like he wasn't nominated for like album of the year or whatever. And there's other people that weren't nominated, but of course like Taylor Swift is nominated and all your typical bullshit. Although Taylor Swift's album this year, Folklore is really good album. But it's besides the point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but my thoughts on it though are just like, and people are like, the Grammys don't matter anymore, and I'm just like, the Grammys never mattered, dude. the,
Yeah, isn't it just a big old huge party for celebrities to get together and circle jerk each other?
yeah, and they can't do that this year, so they're like actually upset about the awards. But
They
also it's like
somehow pulled it off for the AMAs.
it's one of those things though, because what's his name? Fucking TJ Miller, right? TJ Miller, he won an award at some award show, and he went up to accept it, and he goes up, and his acceptance speech was, "I would say that awards are for children." And I'd say the real award is the love and adoration of my peers, because who cares about awards? They're meaningless. They're like these statues. And he's absolutely correct.
Yeah, he has a point.
Especially with music, I could make the argument that like the Oscars make somewhat of sense because like something like a movie, there is like some objective truths with movies where like you can objectively say something's bad, but even a movie is subjective, right? But
Right.
music more than any other form of media is super subjective. Some people like rock, some people like metal, some people like R&B, some people like funk, and no one's music taste is the same. Also, I really like bad shit when it comes to music. Like I like Blink 182's first album, which just sounds like they recorded it on a dumpster, and like I like that shit because it's music and it's not really meant to do anything. It's usually also not a group of thousands of people like a movie, right? Like a movie is
Yeah.
usually a conglomerate thing where there's a million different people working on it. Typically with music, you have a couple songwriters, you have like the artists themselves and like a couple engineers, right?
Yeah.
And that's like on a grand scale. That's like Bieber shit, that's like Taylor Swift shit. And then you've got other shit where it's just like a band recorded it themselves, in their fucking bedroom. Billie Eilish is a great example where she just it's just her and her brother, and they just recorded in their bedroom.
Her and her
Um,
brother boyfriend. Yeah.
yeah, her brother boyfriend. But like
What's the one rocker that you and I are both fans of? The one that we always gush over and we love him because of the great things that he does. The older guy.
Dave
Can't remember
Grohl.
his name. Dave Grohl.
Yeah,
Dave Grohl is like the same person. He doesn't go all the way out. Yeah, Jake showing his Dave Grohl tattoo or whatever the hell that was.
Foo Fighters. I've got a.
Foo Fighters.
So
Oh, I
I've got
didn't
a
see
Foo
the other
Fighters
F.
tattoo.
But
Yeah.
but Dave
It's actually
Grohl.
Friends Forever. Is actually the. Sorry, go ahead.
So Dave Grohl and the food flingers, they don't have that big old huge thing. They record their albums in someone's garage.
True, but I will say about Foo Fighters, and they've mentioned this themselves, where they're like the last rock band to like be part of those things. Just because rock is still around. Like, I listen to rock music. I listen to everything though, but you know,
I do too. I like rock music.
yeah, but like, you know, I play rock music. I play R&B music and funk too, but what am I saying? But like,
I don't
rock
know.
music isn't like what it was in the 90s, you know? It's
No,
not the top. It's definitely not the top dog anymore. I'd say like rap,
Red Hot
R&B.
Chili Peppers isn't as hot as they used to be.
True. Yeah, they're the red cold chili peppers these days.
The red mild chili peppers.
But I would say on top of that, with the Grammys versus like something like the Oscars, where I still think the Oscars are irrelevant and who gives a fuck. But I'd say the Oscars are more fair just because, you know, how many movies come out a year, you know?
Yeah.
A few hundred, maybe?
Yeah. You would know better. You're the movie
1,000?
buff.
Maybe?
I
But
don't
like,
know about thousands.
yeah, well, that's like including like smaller films, right?
Oh, okay.
And then like big budget films, there's like 10. And then like, you know, smaller indie sort of studio films, there's probably a couple hundred. But music, there's got to be tens of thousands albums coming out every month. Like, just because anyone can record an album in their fucking bedroom these days. And
especially with the advent of the internet.
yeah, and I would argue that music specifically, probably the best artists are the ones you don't know about, you know? So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
because everybody, there are some really good artists that are not commercialized. You know, they're not mainstream. There are some amazing artists out there, and I mean, I have a friend who's one, Just James, and he's an amazing artist. He's an amazing songwriter, but he's not considered mainstream, and he should be, but he's not. He hasn't. I don't know if it's right to say he hasn't reached that level, but he's an amazing artist, and he's surrounded by amazing individuals that I feel musically and vocally could run circles around a lot of these commercialized artists.
Well, and that's the point too. It's not even just about musicianship when it comes to music. Just being a great musician doesn't mean you're gonna. And I'm not talking about Just James; he's amazing. But you know, just being a great musician doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna write the next banger. You could be like the worst musician ever, pick up a guitar and lay down a few chords and write the most moving piece of music of all time. I mean, even like Nirvana, you know, like the dude could barely play guitar, but wrote some of the best songs ever, because that's what music is. It's all about evoking emotion and shit, and it doesn't need to be crystal clear and pearly. It can be whatever. And yeah, the Grammys just have never really made sense to me. I'd love to win one day, but, but you know, I
want to know what's behind it though. After you win a Grammy, do you have access to people you've never had access to before? Can you now request or can you make demands that you weren't able to make before? Or is it the equivalent of being able to put the comma DO after your name when you get your doctorate degree in animatronics? What comes with it? What's the benefit of being a Grammy winner? Why is it such a pursued achievement? What's behind it? What comes with it? What power does it have? Or is it just another metal piece of another metal statue that you can put in the background of your Zoom calls?
I think it used to be like really good publicity, right? Where it used to be like 5-time Grammy Award winner, you know, and like that used to be kind of prestigious. I would say nowadays it doesn't really mean dick, because like you say 5-time Grammy Award winner and it's like some person you've never heard of, and you're like, who cares?
But who's to say that behind these awards like the Grammys, who's to say there's not a political world that we're not aware of? Meaning that if you shake the hand of the member of the Grammy board or whatever of that nature, you get a Grammy.
No, there is that. I don't want to say too much. I've worked in recording studios, and I know of some people who have at least been nominated for Grammys just by shelling out the money. They just shell out money for a Grammy campaign and get nominated.
So it's like
literally
getting a
that.
star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, I believe you just buy it.
Yeah, that's maybe true. I don't know.
So there's some politicizing behind it. So if there's politicizing behind it where you can shake the right hands and wink at the right people, or maybe kiss the right ass and you win the award, it means nothing.
Yeah, I also feel like Grammys maybe made more sense back in the like fucking, 50s, 60s, 70s, like it was harder to record an
celebrity
album.
meant something different in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Absolutely.
Because you had to work hard for it. You can't be like Lil Nas X where you just happen to download a $25 track from some artist that you've never met before and put lyrics over it, and then all of a sudden you're the next biggest manufactured star.
Yeah, you fucking Christmas special with Miley Cyrus.
Yeah, and I mean he's the. I got a new classification for Lil Nas X, just as a little small digression. He's the modern day Elton John. He's really going above and beyond with and I'm talking about with the costumes and the flamboyancy and stuff.
You know
like
who I think modern day Elton John is? Just to push back a little, Lady Gaga. I think she's our Elton John.
I can see that too. But Lil Nas X is just going a little too far for me at this point. His artistry is starting to extend past his.
I love him. I think he's great.
I love his music. I love his personality, but he's just going too far. It's just a little too far-fetched for me at some point. But nevertheless, it's like back in the 60s, 70s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, it meant something to be part of Hollywood. It meant something to have a movie that was being recognized over all other movies because, Jake, from what you said before, we didn't have 100 blockbuster movies every year coming out back in those days. You were lucky if you landed a blockbuster movie. Everybody back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s were doing plays. And then if you landed a movie, that was huge. And then I think it would lead to you being able to have a bigger payday. It gave you a little bit more credence and recognizability in the industry if you were on that stage for a Grammy, you know what I mean? Or so I just think that it's just so, maybe the fact that it's just so easy to become a musician or an artist these days and release a track, that's what's watered it down. The whole industry is watered down.
Well, I think personally, and I think it has a lot to do with like streaming services and the internet. It's just easy as hell to get music now. And, I wouldn't say like these days, there isn't like your big artists. There isn't like your I don't know, Rolling Stones. There isn't like your Beatles. There isn't like your Elvis, because everyone has their own version of that when it comes to the music industry now because of the way streaming services is. It's like, for me, it's whoever, Hayley Williams or whatever. For someone else, it's Lil Nas X. For someone else, it's some artist I've never even heard of.
True.
And that wasn't the case back in the day. I personally think it's a great thing. It certainly devalues the use of the Grammys, but I think it's great because I think now everyone can find their own voice much easier now. Like everyone can find their own taste. Everyone can find their own niche, much easier than they could back in the day. And I think
to push back on that a little bit, I don't necessarily. I am an old man. I don't necessarily like the fact that everybody has a platform because it takes out the element of the pain, sweat, and tears. I know a handful of musicians and friends that uprooted their entire lives in cities that they grew up in, moved to a place like Nashville, and are really hammering it out. They're not just taking, I think it's the easy road when you just sit behind, dude, my aforementioned kid, Aiden, he has an app on his phone. He records music on it. He mixes it down and he posts it on SoundCloud and it gets 1,000 to 2,000 to 4,000 listens. So I think that it waters it down. I want time tested. When you look back and you look at the Aretha Franklins and you look at the Patti LaBelle's and you look at the Beatles and you look at a lot of these artists, look at Dolly Parton, those people paid their dues. They had to get out and hustle their music to get in the eyes of the right people. Nowadays, it's a hashtag.
Well, okay. Let me push back. I'm gonna push back even harder on you, boy.
Don't call me boy.
Sorry, Dad.
It's Poppy.
Push back even harder, Poppy. No, because here's the thing: music is art. And I know you're laughing.
You're such a hippie.
Maybe, whatever. Kill me if you want. I will die on this hill because music is art, and if people can express their art easier, and people can find art that they relate to easier, there's no world where that's a bad thing. Sure, the pain, sweat, but that pain, sweat, tears, blood, all that good stuff, that still exists. And in fact, it's even harder to make money as like a professional artist. I'd say it's even harder though to make it as like an artist who makes a livable wage now, because there is such a increase in numbers. But what's different now is there aren't so many people making the millions at the top and no one's making money at the bottom. Instead, what it is, it's kind of balanced out a bit. People at the top make less, and the people at the bottom can potentially make money if they find their fan base. I think it's a good thing overall. I think it's overall a good thing. You have to have different revenue streams. You have to do different things. You really have to grind it out if you want to make a living as a musical artist these days. It's not so much as I just go to a studio now, record an album, have a big budget record label behind me, and make $1 gazillion because I've got the train behind me. That's not the case anymore. Now we've got people like Post Malone who didn't have a label. He posted it out there. He built his own audience from the ground up. Same with Billie Eilish. They built it from the ground up, and they did it themselves. They didn't need a big machine behind them. Fuck the machine, dude. The machine has been limiting for years. So I don't know. I think
on your point of it being a machine, I understand where you're coming from. But the music industry today is, you have those good artists that could be where they should be successful wise, but it's the music industry is now a Where's Waldo picture. You've got thousands and thousands and millions upon people trying to make it to that one person, and it's nearly impossible to find that one Where's Waldo. Everybody's not going to have that. I want to see the person that when they get to that, in order to get to that big corporate level, if you will, or to become that, I'm not a big fan of hers, but let's take Beyonce. Beyonce did not become who she is by the fact that she was just gimmicky and posted something online. She played shit locations. She got turned away. She fought her way through with her parents, and it was not handed to her. Little Nas X is a gimmick.
The only reason and he did it himself. And he's been able to market himself and stay relevant regardless, because it's so easy to have that one pop and then disappear forever nowadays. He's been able to continue to market himself as important. And Beyonce, great example. Yes, Beyonce worked her ass off. She has a great voice. You don't have a great voice if you don't work your ass off. That's just the way it is. Same with any sort of instrument. But she would have never made it if she wasn't in Destiny's Child, which was absolutely just a fucking studio put these people together and made $1 gazillion off of them. And oftentimes back then, especially, artists would make dick money while these big corporate studios made all the money, which still happens today, but it's definitely dying. And you see the big artists who make the money upset about it. Jay-Z specifically, who's like upset that he doesn't make all the money anymore. And it's
Mary
like, fuck
J.
you, dude.
Blige, Tony Braxton.
But it's like, fuck you, dude. The money's going back to us. Although Spotify's a piece of shit and doesn't pay people. But, you could go out, you can make all your money from your live shows, your merch. You could stream on the side. I know a lot of musicians who stream on the side now. There's so many different ways to do it. And to me, it's always been about the artistry. Who cares about the money?
I think it's just so watered down that it's
always been the case, though, Corey. It's always
the industry
been the case.
Is so, and you're more in closer to the music industry than I am. I could speak for radio industry all day long, but for me, it just seems like it's the Where's Waldo, where the world is often just searching, through this cacophony of mimics and gimmicks of the same thing over and over. And when you find that one Waldo, then you kind of hit the jackpot. I understand what you're saying too, and I agree with you, but overall, I think, and this all ties back to what you were saying to begin with, the awards, they really are meaningless because the industry is so watered down. And when you water something down, you lose its flavor.
Yeah, I don't know.
You lose its potency, in my opinion.
I think there's just a big melting pot of flavor now. Everyone can find their own flavor. That sounds like a
disaster. You can't have a melting pot of flavor, Jake. That sounds like, what are you going to do when someone comes up with a flavor of sushi and lemongrass? You're done. That's a cacophony of that sounds good. It's a cacophony of disaster. But I agree with what you're saying now. I honestly do see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I think there were definitely perks to the old system and the way things worked. But I think ultimately we're bringing it back to what it was, or to what it's meant to be. Because, that whole system of music and the industry and all that shit didn't even really come into being until, early 1900s anyway. Before that, what music really was just, well, besides like Mozart and shit, what music really was just some dude on the corner busking, and it wasn't about making a ton of money. It was just, I love music, man, and I will play it for you. And that's what music should be, in my opinion.
And I don't think that the music industry is going back to what it used to be. If that's the case, then there would be very few African Americans in the industry. But I believe what's happening is that it might be correcting itself. I mean, Hollywood overall might be correcting itself. With so much of, because
Hollywood's having
so
a hard
broken.
time keeping up. I think Hollywood is having a hard time keeping up because what it is just people have taken the power into their own hands, which is great.
I mean, our cell phones make movies now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
And that's great. That's great. If you want to make a movie, that's great.
Thing, I guess.
I love the idea that someone can post their art onto YouTube and they can find an audience for that. And they put their blood, sweat, and tears into this project by themselves. No support. They did it themselves. That's what made Kevin Smith so great back in the day. He made Clerks by himself. He put all of his money onto this fucking film, and that's what made him so great. And now, the way things are, it just makes it easier for more Kevin Smiths to exist. Which,
where's our audience?
Debatable,
Jake?
But
where's our audience?
That's the other problem, though, because there are so many people doing it. It does become a bit of an
oversaturation. It's the Where's Waldo.
I guess.
Where's Waldo?
You win some, you lose some.
That's very true.